This is my perspective discussion series where women talk Budo.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of my Perspectives Women Talk Budo discussion series. Today I'm with my co-host Kathy. How are you, Kathy?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you.
And we're very happy to introduce you to Yanti Amos, who's accepted to join us. So today we want to talk about two big topics. One is competition in martial arts, and the other one is teaching and authority in martial arts. So Yanti, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, and hi to my host. Thank you for having me. A little bit about me. I am a yoga and Shotokan karate instructor, and I teach globally. And I'm part of a group which is spearheaded by my husband, Richard Amos, who is very well known in the Shotokan karate world. And we both run his international group, international organization, which has about 20 or so member countries. And, after 12 years or so of running my own yoga studio in New York City, I decided to transition into full-time teaching abroad with Richard, doing seminars and traveling the world. And basically we see a lot of airports and a lot of dojos around the world. But I'm also a wellness industry mentor, and I help a lot of yoga teachers in New York City and beyond evolve in their career. And I also do the same for a lot of women karate instructors around the world. And it's something I love. It's something that I would never have known 20 years ago that I was going to be doing this, but I really feel it is my soul's mission. So I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you very much for having me.
That's very interesting because you do two activities that are very active, and you do them in an active way as well, moving around the world, and it's very very interesting. So let's start with our first part. Martial arts involve competition in different forms, right? And in competitive martial arts like karate, judo, taekwondo, tournaments are a part of training, a part of progression. And also in martial arts in general, competition appears informally as well. So we compare ourselves to others to see how we're doing. And we want to ask you how you understand the role of competition in martial arts.
Yeah, I mean, you see it in all forms, especially in a place like New York City, which is where I'm currently doing this interview from New York. And, Richard has been traveling. He's in Norway right now, and he and I share the teaching. And he normally leads most of the dojo classes, but when he travels, I take over the schedule in the Hombu. And it's great, actually. I'm not saying that it's great not having him here, because I love having him to inspire me in my own teaching. But when he is away, it's so interesting to see how the dynamic of the dojo, how it changes when a strong male lead is absent. And so we're asked as female instructors to step up and take on a leadership position where we might normally just want to disappear into the background, or we might want to step up. But when we take that role, there's just so much that happens in terms of the psychological dynamic within the dojo. And I'm sure you guys see it in your own home dojo in London, I'm sure. And I heard in your first episode where you said the four of you, your core group of women, you're normally the ones that always show up. And so in a way, you have a sort of pecking order. In terms of, you guys are the regulars, you're the diehards, you're the ones that are leading the charge, representing women. And I find something similar in our Hombu as well, where, you get a bit of a pecking order happening. And it's coming back to your point, Fran, there's a sense of competition that kicks in. And I want to say that with regard to competition, Oftentimes it's about competing against yourself. You want to be the best you can be. You want to fulfill your own potential, and you therefore work really, really hard. But it takes a very evolved person, someone who has done a lot of personal growth work, to realize when you're sort of overstepping and pushing boundaries and perhaps being a bit disrespectful to not just your co-students or your colleagues, but also to a sensei. And Richard and I both feel it because we're in New York City. This is a group of people who are the leaders in their fields. They are extremely
outside of the dojo. You mean they're leaders in their field?
Absolutely, they are.
Yeah.
They're captains of industry. They are being the ones that really dictate whatever in front of them, whether it's their teams in their corporate context, or
they might be a CEO of their company.
Absolutely, or a big science leader, or a big medical professional. They're all famous in their own way. So that when they come to the dojo, they have to really eat humble pie, and they have to show a lot of humility. In the karate world, we have this expression called "just say os," and this is the name of my husband's book, Chasing Bushido. How I learned to just say os, and the idea in the Shotokan world, anyway, is that you just have to say, "I understand, I accept, I will do what you say," and you have to trust your senpai or your sensei. So coming back to the context of competition, you're not necessarily going to get that in New York City. So
I see.
It's very, very interesting because it is, it's a fantastic question, Fran and Kathy, because we grapple with that every single day of teaching in the Hombu and also beyond, I have to say, not just in the context of New York, where people are very, they're leaders in their field, they're righteous, they're self-entitled, and they're going to tell you what they think. And it's kind of the opposite of what's expected within the concept of just say os, which is bow and accept, don't answer back, don't have an opinion unless you're asked, that sort of thing. So, and you brought it up actually in the first episode, that the ethos and the vibe of your dojo really depends on your lead sensei. And so we've had to enforce or reinforce and role model this idea of just saying os, being humble, and accepting that those who teach you are there teaching you out of the goodness of their hearts, but they have your welfare and they have your education and your learning evolution at heart. And certain trust that has to happen, and an exchange of and an understanding there. And so coming to competition, I think coming back to the idea is that both women and men, this is not just about the gender discussion, but both men and women in the Hombu have had to understand they have to let have to train their own egos to take a bit of a back seat, if that makes sense.
It's very interesting. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I lost you. But it's very interesting. As you were talking, Yanti, a couple of things came to my mind. The first one was you talked about eating humble pie, and I thought about this calligraphy that O-sensei did. And it's true victory. It's very famous. True victory is victory over the self.
Yes.
And I think it's also interesting that you're talking about, you're in New York, so it's I imagine there's a heavy cultural influence, isn't there, of kind of being being a leader or being unique. And another thing that sprung to my mind was you mentioned your husband, Richard Amos Sensei's book, Just Say Os. And it reminds me of another book, the title of another book that I've just started. And it's called Bow First, Ask Questions Later. And it's actually about an American woman and her experience going into a Zen monastery in Japan.
Yeah.
And she had to, I haven't read the whole thing yet. I've just started it, but it's just that title. It really, it just reminded me of this book, and it's all about how, of course, and she really recognizes being an American woman. I'm taught to be opinionated. I have my strong ideas about who I am and what I believe. And then as soon as she stepped foot into that monastery, she had to let go all of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's very similar to what you're saying, in the sense that, well, in here, it's not only are you not the boss, but you can forget all the other stuff too.
Well, it's a shedding. Absolutely. I mean, it's a shedding of your identity in many respects. It's also your titles, your job designation. It's all that you've achieved outside, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything in the context of the dojo, because at the end of the day, you're the student, and you're there to just soak it all in and accept, and also accept where you are on your journey. And that takes a lot of. I think it takes a lot of mindfulness, but also a sense of just knowing that you are on this evolutionary path, and you cannot afford, if you want to advance. Here's the thing, even though it's extremely hierarchical, and we've got the belt system. I know you go from white to black, and then you wear your hakama, or there's a slight difference, but we have many belts and little cues in between, and so it's very much that the case that you earn every little grading and every step of the way, but you sort of have to have this interesting balance between the humility of not looking at your grade, but at the same time standing up and filling the shoes of a senpai when you get senior enough, and then you have all the juniors below you. So you have to understand your place. And it's this concept which it always talks about, and I see that it's a discernment issue. It's sense nai and sense aru. So do you have sense, and do you have a sense of judgment and a sense of understanding how to behave in different contexts and in different scenarios with Joe and even beyond, or and then the opposite, of course, is sense aru, which is the attainment of this sense of knowing how to behave in all contexts, and knowing your place and your duties and your obligations to not just yourself as let's say you're a green belt, and then what is your duty to the little juniors underneath you, but also to your senpais above you. And so, there's a lot of discernment that has to be honed and polished over your life of being in the dojo.
It's quite complex. Thinking about what could be probably a positive aspect of having this hierarchy of progression is that maybe it helps manage the entitlement and all the other characteristics you mentioned. Like, so you enter into this lab, in a way, this microcosmos. You take off your hat from outside, and then, but you have this order anyway. It's not a chaotic microcosmos. It's not chaotic at all, actually. So in a way, that the hierarchy helps probably manage that. Also creates tension, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point, actually, Fran. With that comes a layer of ambition. And I think that it's something that we can't discount, because I think everybody who comes to the dojo is at the back of their mind thinking, how can I advance? How can I learn what I need to learn in order to master this art, or this self-defense and this martial art, in order to be effective and to be able to do what I would ultimately like to do, which is to protect myself. And that goes for men and women, obviously. So you have an end goal in mind at the back of your head, or maybe at the forefront of your head, but that involves you wanting to continuously up level. And when I say people want to up level in the New York context, it's very interesting, because people can be very, very upfront about that, and they want an end result out of each class. So they're going to ask you, okay, so, what are you going to teach today? And they try to dictate
really?
the direction of where things go within what you've planned, for example. And they're going, and it's so interesting because that doesn't happen elsewhere.
And can I ask, Yanti, is there a difference between obviously there is a difference between you and your husband Richard in the sense that Richard is more senior. Yeah. But however, you then, as you say, when Richard Sensei is away, you then often step into the role of leading. And do you find, is it the same for him? Does he also have this kind of demand from the students, or is it?
Yeah, it's a great question because he and I talk about this sort of thing a lot because it happens with both of us. And that's why we came to the conclusion how senior you are. It depends on your, as you mentioned, the culture within the dojo. That's really something to do with the geographical location and you're in. And so it's quite kind of unique to the US, I would say, and also to New York City, because New York City, as you all know, is extremely intense. It's highly competitive, and there's a reason why Frank Sinatra said, when you've made it here, you've made it. You can make it anywhere. The old song. New York, and it still holds true post-COVID. And so people are here for a reason. They're here to be successful. They're here to, for their careers. And by God, if they decide to do Shotokan karate or any other thing, they want also to have, these milestones and to achieve certain end goals. And so to come back to the story, it's very interesting because both of us have students who say, well, I want to work on this. I want to be able to master this. And I want to, at the end of this class or at the end of this month or whatever, I want these things to be part of my so-called arsenal. And so you get that in the private student context, but you also will get it in group class context. And so probably I get it more than he does because he's the sensei and he's the one that can be harsher, let's say, because
I suppose that because of their positions that they have outside the dojo, they are very good at gauging how to dominate situations, and they know that you're there leading temporarily, so probably they might sense that, but then you have to assert your place and manage that situation as well.
Correct, and it's so many stories out of this actually, because I have to try and remember all of them that I want to share with you guys. But coming back just to wrap up that thing about, does Richard get it as much as I do? And I probably get it a little bit more because when I was first starting out as a full-time instructor and really gaining ground, but also getting a sense of my authentic way of teaching, which is by the way quite different from the way Richard does. I mean, I regard Richard as my senior role model and my sensei, obviously. But when you find your own voice and when you find, and I found that not just with karate, but also with yoga, that you are going to draw from different life experiences. I mean, I was a former lawyer. I was a lawyer for 17 years. So I'm going to come to the table with a whole paradigm and a whole way of looking at things, which is sort of business-like. But at the same time, I'm deeply entrenched in the yoga world and the spiritual traditions that come out of yoga and the Hindu Buddhism, plus I grew up in a Muslim family, but I went to Church of England schools in Australia. And, I have all of that crazy mix. And so I'm always going to bring that blend or cocktail of that perspective to whatever I teach. And that's going to, by definition, be different from what Richard teaches and how he teaches. And I think that it's taken me time, but I think I'm slowly but surely getting a sense of who I am as an instructor. And I think people start to see that very early commentaries from students were when Richard and I teach side by side overseas. They see how Richard teaches and they see how I teach. And this is karate. And they say, well, Yanti's really different from the way you teach Richard, and she uses different languaging. She's got a different energy. She's just got different. Of course, I mean, for me, when I listen to that story and Richard's recounting it to me, I say, well, of course. What do you think? You know,
Yeah.
come to the table, as I just said, with all of that different background, and I am going to teach therefore from that different place. And when I see something that's relevant, I might draw from all these different experiences and traditions and say it when it's relevant. Yeah, a little bit.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
The process of finding your voice as a teacher is very, very interesting. Have you ever do you have any stories about moments where you have seen competition as an unhealthy element of the journey that people have when training?
Oh, you mean in the dojo? You mean
in the dojo? Yeah, with your students or even in your own life, like if you.
Yeah, no, many. I don't know which ones to start with. Yeah, I mean, one that sort of stands out that happened, probably one of the standouts from last year, I would say, is that not having taught live because we were in COVID and the pandemic was quite uniquely Zoom dominated, as you can imagine, and you guys did your own version, I know, but we've come back to the dojo context, and I can honestly say that I'm quite practiced and comfortable teaching on Zoom, but it took a little bit of a transition, shall we say, to find my feet again in person in the dojo, and you've got all these bodies around you, and that was a little it was odd. It was really weird because I was doing a lot of dojo classes in COVID in my mother-in-law's garage, or in her lounge room. So it was something that one had to adapt to. But the story I wanted to say was that it became a little bit of a wild, wild west thing, meaning that people thought, okay, this is my lounge room or a lounge room sort of context where it became very workshoppy. And I don't know, in Shotokan is quite disciplined, and we don't really speak back to our senseis. And I don't know whether Aikido and Iaido, there's a bit more conversation going to and fro, but in karate, you don't really chat back.
Yeah, I would say it's similar.
Yeah, not much of the peanut thing going on. And so what I was finding was that a lot of people would say, well, what about this? And well, what are you going to do next? And questioning. And so I took it personally. And I told the stories to Richard afterwards, and I said, am I going crazy? Or, are they questioning me? Or is it a question of not trusting my authority on advanced kata or whatever it happened to be, So I dealt with it well. But I often would throw it back on people if they did question me, and I wanted them to see that it's not an easy thing to stand in front of a class, give your energy, give your knowledge, give everything to ensuring that everybody gets it and everybody understands it and is then able to translate it into their own bodies. And so there was one instance where I was questioned, and I threw it back on the person questioning me. Happened to be a guy, but I threw it back on him, and I just said to him, well, what do you think? And he didn't have anything to say. And I said, well, stand up here and show me how you do it. Tell me how you would do this attack or this application. Or, I wanted him to realize that putting languaging together that lands on the student body is complicated, and meaning in real time, you have to be sensing, are they getting it? And are they understanding how I've explained a concept? And can they then, for biomechanical alchemy, can they understand how they can then express that technique in their usual body, but in a way that's going to be effective? And then I think there was something that, the penny dropped for him, and he fell back into line. And it was interesting because I knew he was trying to be helpful, but it was very, if I may say, it was a little pompous, it was patronizing, and it was a bit of a smart ass kind of comment. It was a little bit trying to put me in my place because he was a similar belt level.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm not going to be unkind.
It's kind of bad form, isn't it? I mean, just to compare to, if we're talking Aikido, I'm far more junior to where you are with your karate, but I do get the chance to teach sometimes, and often in the class will be my senpai. So not even my level or a little bit lower than me, but my senpai by far, a long way my seniors. And they'll be participating in my lesson, and they wouldn't do that, I think, especially not in front of in front of the class as well. And no doubt afterwards they might say, or I might ask them afterwards, for feedback, or what did you think of this, and how could I have explained this. But if they in the middle of the lesson during the teaching said, questioned it, questioned what I was teaching.
You on the spot as well.
Yeah,
exactly. It would be really bad form, I think. And so it's quite shocking to hear that.
Although that said, I have to look at it because I asked several questions. I ask, am I taking it too personally? Am I reading into it? And I always look at those experiences, and this is sort of a teaching point for teachers, is what did you learn from that? Were you prepared enough? And are you able to field any and all questions on these topics? Even if you're not, are you bold enough and honest enough to say when you don't know something? I mean, and so that was a great lesson for me. As a teacher, I'm thinking, well, next time I'm asked that, I do have to ask myself, where do I stand on, X, Y, Z possible interpretations of this application? And so I get curious. If I'm uncomfortable and I feel after a class, oh, that didn't go so well, or I'm judgy on myself, I'm going to ask myself why. And I'm going to say, well, I'm uncomfortable there because maybe I felt like I didn't really know it as well as I think I should know it, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So you have to be super honest with yourself. Go away, and then you do the homework, and you do the work that's required to be able to field what it is, answer any possible conceivable question that may come from the floor. But that said, you can't know everything. And so you have to be liberated enough and okay enough with yourself to just show up and give the best class you could give. And that's still okay. It doesn't have to be the perfect class. It can be still so much meat and content and nourishment for your students to go away and think about things, but also to work really hard in class. It doesn't have to be fantastic. And that's always a subjective assessment in any event. But, and I've come to realize that is so important, that you can't take it too personally, because you'll always come away with a lesson, and you'll come away richer because you've been put on the spot. So I never try to avoid those scenarios. I try to flip it and ask myself, what can I learn from this? And so I think that's what's made me a much better teacher than even a year ago, for example. And so instead of taking it really personally, and I sort of run it by Rich, and he sort of said, well, no, I get questions like that all the time. So what are you talking about? And then so I can sort of start to think to myself, oh, okay, maybe I read too much into that. Maybe I was just a little bit too, I'm a girl and he's a guy, and, he's asking me these questions because he's trying to make me feel uncomfortable. Or there's, I don't know, let's say hypothetically, I'm not saying that this was the case, but let's say there's a bit of envy, or coming back to the idea of competition. Maybe there's going on in the dojo context where, guys can be this way as well as women. They can feel like, oh, why was she teaching? Why is she teaching over, someone? And, the great thing about the dojo where we are is that everybody gets a chance to teach. And so everyone has an opportunity. And I was going to come back, Kathy, to the point where you were teaching in front of your senpais. And the great thing is that, and for the most part, they're not going to put you on the spot, but nothing's wrong with them asking you and quizzing you and making you squirm and asking, what is your idea on this, and this? And that's actually a good thing, because you're going to evolve from that. So normally when I teach, and I do teach in front of a lot of much more senior men and women, whenever I teach with Richard overseas, I get nervous over that, because I know that I'm going to be in front of world-class people, and I better, really be ready for it. So I do think very hard about those international gigs that I do with Richard. So I've always thought that luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So you really want to obviously love what you do, but really go deep and think really hard about what you're going to teach and how you're going to deliver, and the potential questions you might get, but how can you language it so that everybody really loves it and feels the excellence of what it is that you want to transmit. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into it when I know I'm going to be teaching in front of very senior people. That said,
I like that. Luck is when, what did you say? You said luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Opportunity meets preparation.
I like that.
It's amazing. It's one that's really helped me, because I don't look at any squirmy, uncomfortable situation as a bad thing these days. I look at it as a chance to grow. And okay, I didn't do great here, or I feel like I could have done better, or I feel, I wonder whether they really got that bit, moving this way versus the way I wanted them to move. And so I take away that and I think, okay, how could I tweak the wording or the directions or the cueing? And maybe what I needed there was just a louder voice, because in Shotokan karate we really have to do the count, and when we have to deliver in a really have it come from the tanden, and really radiate out what we want to deliver. So it's the voice is very important. And I don't know whether that's so much the case with Iado and Aikido, but in Shotokan, it's definitely the case. And so that's the thing. Stepping into your leadership role as an instructor means that you have to be okay with being strong with your voice, and then you just call everyone in, and then you do a kind of a workshopping point, and you say in normal voice instead of the screaming voice or the shouting voice or teaching voice, you then explain something in normal languaging with everyone very close by. And so you'll choose, coming back to sense 9, sense aru, when you have to say things in a more gentle human voice, when you have to scream and shout and deliver and get something more. Let's say you want to, if people are being a bit lazy, or people are not giving you the full energy, full power, and you want more from them, what's going to be what are the skills and the tools you're going to use as a teacher in order to bring that sort of energy out in people? And so that's where the discernment comes in, as someone who's in front of like hundreds of people, and you have to, you just want not just the content and the substance, but there's a whole layer of how much energy people put into it.
I'm thinking of an orchestra director, but Kathy, you're a musician, Kathy. So like it's I don't know, very soft, and the movements are very soft, and then forte and boom, boom.
Well,
boom,
it's funny. It's really funny that you say that, Fran, because as I was listening to you just now, Yanti, I could really identify with what you were saying, but actually not so much in an Aikido sense, because actually it sounds like from what you're saying that the use of your voice is much more. I mean, there is some of that in Aikido, I suppose, but not in the way that it sounds like it is in Shotokan karate. But I actually am no longer a music teacher as of about a week ago, but I have been a classroom music teacher for about 6 years, and it sounds very, very similar in the sense. And actually, a lot of it is not at least now, having had experience teaching music, it's not a conscious thing but it's something that you get used to. It's like, how do I how I choose to use my voice in certain situations. Do I need to give a lot of energy? And how do I draw things out of them? And a lot of it is to do with my body language and the use of my voice. And am I going to do this softly? Am I going to draw them in this way, or do I need to be like, come on, guys, come on, what was that? Do it again, kind of thing. It's funny. I really identify with that, but more from teaching music, actually.
Yeah, because the thing is that what I'd say also, Kathy, is that when you are teaching a seminar or you're teaching a class context, and you're in a class context, and is a special class because it's not just a normal dojo scheduled class, let's say, that it is a sort of a performance. So there's a performative aspect, and by performative I mean you're being scrutinized and you are being looked at as the person leading whoever is attending, and that might range from 20 to 50 to 100 people. And there's as Fran said about the conductor, you are telling a story within the context of the so-called song or the piece or piece, and there's going to be an arc. There's going to be a story that unfolds, and there's an arc. It comes to a crescendo, and then it sort of slows down, and then it might lift up again when you're reinforcing certain aspects of the sequencing, and then you'll come and revisit another theme, and then you'll go away, and then it'll be the coda or whatever parallel draw. But it is like not just a story, as we said, but it is like an orchestral piece. It's very interesting how there's so many parallels with music and performance.
Absolutely.
I'm curious now that we are bringing up other disciplines. I'm curious about your style or how teaching yoga has fed into your martial arts teaching. Is there do you see a relationship there?
Yeah, so I really credit my yoga teaching and the training that I've had in teaching yoga with being a good, solid karate instructor as well, because I think there's talking about how you teach a class. I think that there's the right balance of technical content, but there's also, when it's necessary, a story or a theme or we call it in the yoga world, we call it Dharma. So we have a Dharma talk, something that's laid in that may be a metaphor or an allegory for some of the postures that you do. And there are layers of understanding, whether that be, I don't know, for argument's sake, let's say a philosophical theme, whether it be let's just say self-reflection, or self-reflection in the context of letting go of the ego and being okay with where you are in your Budo journey, let's say. Because I think, and coming back to your theme, Fran, about competition, the people that evolve quicker and the most, let's say, are those who put aside the attachment to results. So I know the freeing of the need to hit these milestones each time, because when you free yourself of that egotistical need for labels and tags and belt colors, all through the life of your karate journey, you free yourself of, it comes back to this identity thing, that you evolve far beyond your expectations when you let go of that need to say, hey, I'm Godan, or I'm a Yondan, or I'm a, it's this attachment, because we all know that not all Godan instructors were created equal. We know this.
It's not
it doesn't mean
it's standardized, but the bodies are not standardized. So
I would rather be a really, really good, let's say, Nidan level person and teach my heart out, rather than a Godan who's not a very good teacher, let's say. I mean, that takes a lot of a lot of self-awareness, and you have to have done a lot of personal growth work, and you have to have such a sense of mindfulness around that. But what I was going to say was so many stories. What was I beginning to tell you? I think I was going to tell you about, it was about the context of, about teaching. What was I talking about, Kathy? And Fran? I was going to tell you.
Teaching.
Yeah, I was going to
and the connection with your yoga teacher. And
thank you. So coming back to that, that has informed how I throw in the Dharma, how I throw in themes, and I remind people in the karate context to just let go of the need to prove anything. An example I was going to tell you guys was that I was in a class today, and I was counting. And there's a reason why I do the count, so that everybody feels everything slowly. And then I pick up the pace, because you're going to go small, but you're going to go slow, you're going to go medium, and then you're going to go full speed and power. And there's a reason why we go slow first, so that the mechanics and the technical aspects of the technique itself is going to be correctly done. And then you get the full effect when you go medium.
And I would say I've noticed that it can be a lot harder to do things slowly than to do them fast.
Right. And so here's the story. So coming back to the competition aspect, is that everybody jumped to, I said 1, 2, and 3, right? And so everyone was already at 3 before I did 2. And so it's people preempting what they think you want them to do, but it's also to show from an ego perspective, hey, I can do it. And I always say, keep to the count, start again, move back, again, move back. And in other words, I'm not going to let them get away with jumping ahead in order for their egos to feel like I beat the person next to me. It's like, there's a reason why we're doing the count, and so it's for me, I guess the way I teach karate is it's layered with this idea that I'm going to also teach people about detachment, and a little bit of mindfulness. And so I'm going to throw in some yoga parallels where it's relevant. I'm not going to obviously teach a yoga class in a karate context, but I am going to, where it is, it makes sense, I am going to add themes that enliven or enlarge a concept and make people understand that this is where the metaphors it's sort of, it is wild the way we can look at all these parallels, and we can look at the metaphors, and the way that we do our karate can also be reflected in the way we live our lives, and just so many, so many things reflected and connected and interconnected. So that I don't know whether that answers your question, Fran, but I'm
it's I really liked how you described it as layers, very interesting layers as well, because you basically bring in concepts that are useful from the other discipline. Also, it seems like you're very good at setting boundaries as well.
I mean, I've learned how to do that, but
That's something I was curious about, actually, Yanti, and I know Fran is curious as well. Partly because obviously I'm, as I said before, I teach music, or I did teach music, and it was funny when you were talking about the count and how some people would rush ahead to the next bit, and it reminded me of when I was teaching a song. And everyone was singing together, and quite often there will be one child that will be singing ahead of everybody else because they want to show that they know the words to the song. And it's like, okay, you know the words, but you're singing as a choir, and if you sing ahead, it doesn't work, it sounds wrong. And it just reminded me of that. But another thing and as Fran said, you're obviously very good at setting boundaries, and I have done a little bit of Aikido teaching, as I mentioned, but I haven't had a lot of experience. I've had a lot of experience teaching, not Aikido, but I haven't had a lot of experience teaching Aikido. And of course, there's yin and yang in all of us. martiality, would you agree, is kind of generally considered a masculine trait? And so how, I was curious as to how, I mean, you kind of have half answered the question already, is how you assert authority in a martial environment as a woman.
It's a great question, and I think we've had this conversation before where you said,
we have,
how do you reconcile a sense of femininity with being representative of that martiality, the adversarial, the being okay with this idea of conflict and this idea of being ready to fight, in quotation marks. And so my answer would be, and I think I partially answered it earlier, where you show up with excellence and you show up as an agent of learning and generosity and substance. And it's the approach I've always had in whatever job I had in the past. And, I was a lawyer before. So I always wanted to deliver those qualities in anything I did. And karate and yoga is no different. And I think that they're pretty key in evolving as a teacher of excellence. And because I look like I'm a wimp, perhaps, or someone that you wouldn't expect all those qualities from, I think we have to, as women, have to work harder at that. And so I've had to do that, and I've accepted that that's going to be the case, because people are going to profile you, they're going to stereotype you, they're going to try to put you in a little box, and they're going to want to know, okay, she's like this, therefore I'm going to interact with her like this. But as an Asian woman, and obviously I grew up in Australia, so I regard myself very much as a Westerner, even though I present and I look very, very Asian. So people are going to think I'm compliant, I'm docile, I'm people pleaser, and I want to make people happy in the context of class, and I'm a pushover. And people are going to they're going to think that, and they're going to say, oh my God, Richard told me the other day, oh, I'm in Norway and everyone's saying, oh my God, Yanti's so nice. And I said, I don't like that. I don't want to be called nice. It's not something I think is, and then he said, oh, come on. It's a compliment. I said, I know, but really what I'd love is if people said, she's nice, but she's also this, and this, So anyway, coming back to how to establish a sense of respect and a sense, I'm not saying that I need recognition necessarily or reverence, but what I do need that respect.
Yeah.
And therefore I think it has to be earned, and therefore I'm really on myself. I'm really sort of policing myself all the time in terms of preparation and understanding. I journal a lot and I research a lot, and I spend the requisite amount of time on YouTube to prepare my classes, and also reading a lot of books. And I also, with my life with Richard, I'm sort of living a kind of lifelong Uchideshi sort of Kenshu experience. We travel a lot together. We talk about karate. There's not one moment, I would say, that we don't talk about the business and running the organization, or we don't talk. I mean, there's not one moment where we don't talk about classes and teaching and what class went well or what didn't go well and why. We're always analyzing. And so I think it's a really good habit to get into, and to always be searching for standards of excellence through just curiosity. And that's a self-development thing. But what I was
You've got to be damn good, basically.
Yeah, you have to be very good in order to earn respect. And I do think that is, I still get people who just call me senpai and don't recognize that I have a sensei to what I do in my life, which is to teach full-time. And I'm no longer a practicing lawyer. And so people don't realize that what Richard and I do is we sleep, eat karate and yoga. And so everything about what we do is very much sort of visceral, because it's so much part of our being and our lifestyle and everything we do. And so there are many people who I think who are sort of part-timers and think that they can question people like Richard. I mean, they can question me because I regard myself as still a learner on the path. But someone like Richard, who really has deserved where he is, the accolades and where he is in his career, I think that it's really rich of some people when they do question that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I sort of think, well, you know what kind of history lineage he's actually had an experience in Japan. And so I sort of think I get protective, obviously, of him in a rational/irrational way at times. But I do expect it, because, of course, there are always going to be the haters. But to come back to this idea, I feel like you have to show up with excellence, and you don't be impatient. My advice to a lot of new teachers is that don't be impatient, because it is going to come. If you're consistent and if you're showing up for your students, and if you're always there learning as much from your students as you give to them, listen to the feedback, listen to the questioning, listen to what they're curious about and what it is they want to learn, and then watch how they learn, and watch, okay, that person's more auditory. That person, you have to show them physically. This person, you actually have to hold them, and you have to position their arms and then test their fists, you know, that thing sometimes, and then they get it. But you have to, you know what I mean? You have to, you have to be fully invested. And I feel like, that's sort of a lifelong endeavor. And I think it's going to come. It will come, and you have to trust.
Yes. Can I ask something more? It's a similar question, but what would do you think that for women who are probably beginning in a martial art, or they're not super advanced, super experienced, do you think that these demand from the society to work harder, do you think that potentially drives them out of staying in martial arts?
Oh, sorry. Can you just describe that again, that last little bit?
Yeah. So this extra demand of having to work harder as a woman to prove yourself in a martial arts space. Do you think that
harder?
Yes.
Harder.
Sorry. Yes. In a martial arts space, do you think that drives out some women from practicing martial arts? Those who are not super experienced or super advanced.
It's a really good question. I would say that there are other things that drive women out of the martial arts, which includes getting married and having children, because that pulls them out of the normal, regular training sessions that they would normally pre-kids. Because you just have to make sacrifices during different phases of your life. And I feel like we all, each one of us, even men included, we all go through different phases of our professional lives where we have to be fully engaged in a job or a project or something that takes a lot of focus. Sometimes you're going to go through stages where you don't make it to the dojo, and then you're going to return to the dojo point. But then what I've seen, and what both Richard and I have seen in the dojo and over decades and decades of teaching the same people, is that we'll see the kids grow up, and we've had kids who we've known since we were 6 and since they were 6, and then they're now in their jobs at out of college or university, and it's wild to see how life just moves forward. I don't even know, it sounds really self-evident and obvious, but we do see the craziness of life. And so coming back to your question, I think women are going to come in and out of the dojo if they've got a commitment to come back regardless of their grade or whatever has gone on before. When they come back to it, it's normally because they've taken time to have kids, or the job professional dimension of what I just spoke about. But to answer your question about the having to work harder, I think women, no matter whether it's martial arts, I think we all know that doesn't matter what sector you work in, whatever profession you're in, whatever job you have, we all know that to some degree we're going to have to prove ourselves in order to do as well, if not better, than our main parts.
And if I might say as well, I think that there's also the other side of that where it can drive women out if the expectation is not high enough of them, I think.
Right.
You know, it's like we were talking in our first episode about our dojo and how there's a very strong female ascendance, and I think, and we kind of had come to conclude that a very important aspect of that was our teacher and the high expectations that he has of us, and he doesn't think, oh, they're not going to get it because they're women. It's and so it's kind of that there's another side to it as well, isn't there? It's like this potential you have to work harder to prove yourself because it's the same in music as well, you know. You have to be, you know, people often say that they feel as a guitarist you've got to be twice as good as a man to be considered good, you know. That's often what I hear, but yeah, at the same time I think if the expectation is low, it's also quite off-putting,
dispiriting, and it's disheartening. And I do think, and I've heard many stories about women being in dojos where they're just not appreciated or encouraged and nurtured and supported enough. And if that's the case, you're going to change dojos and you're going to change senseis. And that's where you would also, another context of Fran, where you would leave and then perhaps come back at another time, but with a new in a new setup with a dojo head and a sensei who you respect and really enjoy in terms of their teaching style. And I think women are not going to tolerate sort of the BS that can happen.
It's like, I'm already working really hard in this aspect, in this aspect, in this aspect. Okay. And then probably simplify.
Oh, totally. And that's why someone like yours, like Ismail, is an amazing sensei. And you referred to him in I think the previous episode where you said he teaches to the individual, and I think it's a very, very. He doesn't look at your gender. He doesn't look at anything except he looks at the case in front of him and what does this person need? How can I bring out the best in this person? And what, you know, as we referred to earlier, what languaging, what directions, what cueing, how can I support this person? Maybe when we go down to the pub for a drink in the group, maybe I can get the backstory. Okay, what's inhibiting this person? What is going on in their life outside of the dojo that's stopping being who they can be in the dojo? You know, it's
And I think in addition to that, I think that one thing I've always appreciated with him is that he doesn't expect me to do it to be exactly like him. Obviously, I can't be exactly like him. He's got like, you know, decades of experience on me, and a completely different life. But what I mean is in the sense that he has a different body from me, and I think he recognizes that, and he doesn't expect me or Fran or anyone who's built differently from him. I think I get the feeling that he really encourages us to find. Obviously, there's the form, which is really important to learn, but there's freedom within the form. And of course, something that he might be able to do because of his strength or whatever, I might not be able to do in exactly that same way. And I think that's really, the fact that he recognizes that as a teacher is really valuable. It's like me trying to teach a boy to sing. I'm not going to get him to sing exactly the same as me because it's not possible. So how does he find his singing voice?
Correct. That's and that takes a great eye and a great a sense of what's appropriate in the moment, and just an overall philosophy about how you teach. I think Ismail and Richard are actually very, very similar in the way that they approach their communities, because what is good for Richard or what's good for Ismail is not necessarily going to be good for one of our students who's 75, or another person with a disability that comes, or a child who very talented and will probably far exceed all of us in their full potential down the road, and someone who's a little bit of an aberration, an athletic whiz kid, for example, and then you've got everybody, all the spectrum. So you've got everybody in between, and so where do you sort of meet them up where they are when they come to the dojo? And it's the same philosophy I have with the yoga as well, because most of my classes are what we call open level classes. You're going to have beginners over there in the corner, sitting probably at the back on their mats, and then you've got all the so-called advanced practitioners in the front row who are a little bit of exhibitionists, and then you've got the injured people sort of in the middle row who know their stuff, but they're going slower. So they don't want to be in the front row. And then you've got all these other people in between, and you have a sort of a mishmash and a mix. But how do I, as a teacher, make every single person feel included and accepted and not judged? And then how do I bring out the best in each and every one of these people who's come to class? And that is what I think Ismail and Richard do in their classes. I try to do the same in both yoga and my karate classes. But what I want is that everybody gets from the class what it is that they need. And it's also what so they'll have in their own mind what they'd like to take out of the class as well. So do they want a little bit of cardio? Do they want a little bit of advanced kata, or what is it that they need in that hour or so together? And so it takes years of teaching. But
yes,
it's possible.
And listening, observation, amazing observation skills. You've given us lots of very interesting insights. I haven't had much experience teaching, very, very, very little, but I definitely can. To teach yourself, you can apply the very, very similar principles. And to start rounding up, we know that you eat, sleep, karate. We want to ask you, why do you train Shotokan, and what drives you to stay there?
It's a really good question. Gosh, it's why do I do it? Not just obviously because my husband does it, but because I was doing it before I actually met Richard, and I started martial arts when I was a teenager, and I started with Taekwondo in Australia, and I there was always something about the martial arts that appealed to me, and I was looking always for some female superhero kind of role model. And that person came to me in the guise of Michelle Yeoh. So when I found out about her,
she's amazing.
She for me was just, I don't know, someone who I sort of wanted to emulate and be a kind of a junior version of her, I guess. I just found that everything about her was just fantastic. And I mean that on all levels, because she was a consummate professional. She's obviously in the acting world in Hollywood and stuff. And so we only see the side to her of, she was a Bond girl, I know that. And then she was also in all these Jackie Chan movies, but she's also now considered a very serious actor and has all these accolades this year, for example. But I'm so happy that that's the case, because a really funny story is that one of the kids I teach karate to, he mentioned to me in class that he really enjoyed my classes because I reminded him of Michelle Yeoh. And for me, that was like the biggest treat and compliment, because I thought, wow, he sees me as someone who's generous, someone who knows his stuff, someone who's nurturing. It can also be kick-ass. And so I love that about and sometimes smallest little comments or side like feedback that you get from students that seemingly insignificant, but actually that make you feel, wow, yeah, you're bringing it full circle. Because when I was your age, I was, I really loved Michelle, and to say that was kind of big deal.
That's really lovely.
Yeah. So that answers your question, but I was always interested in martial arts, and so I've on and off during my early career as a young lawyer, I stopped, but then I started again. So I had my moments of being part of it, because as we talked about earlier with the phases we go through, sometimes you just have to focus on your career, and sometimes you have to focus on, I don't know, looking after a loved one who's going through an illness, or, parents who are aging, or whatever it is. You just have to prioritize, and that's perfectly fine, and that's life. So I do feel that coming back to it, I've always come back to it no matter what, and I'll do it until I drop, basically.
Well, I can feel it, like and that's what you transmit as well when you talk about your experience and your teaching. Kathy, do you want to ask anything?
No, I just want to say thank you for joining, really, because Yanti and I have often had conversations outside of this podcast. We've had various conversations, and to have the opportunity to go a bit deeper into some of these topics that we've kind of touched on before has been really nice. So thank you for sharing your experience, and it's been really interesting.
This has been our episode with with Yanti. I hope that everyone, I don't know, I really feel like more enthusiasm after talking to you. So I hope that everyone else who listens get the same feeling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
You've been listening to My Perspective, where women talk Budo.